And good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining this first bi-yearly meeting of the Citizen Advisory Committee for the CDBG Mitigation Grant. We appreciate your participation in helping to share our work with the community. I want to advise everyone that this meeting is being recorded. To jump right in case anyone has found themselves in the wrong place, this is a meeting to review the program for the city's grant for the U.S. Housing and Urban Development Department's Community Development Block Grant for Mitigation. I'll get into more of the details for the grant in just a second. And just for some initial clarification, we will only be discussing the direct mitigation grant received by the city. With the agenda on screen, we will first go through some introductions, us here at the Housing and Community Development Department, the Mayor's Office, and then the team working with us on this program from Houston Public Works. And then we would love to hear from y'all. Then we'll go over some of the essentials for how we got this grant and dig into how we've set up the program so far in these early stages. Then at the end, we'll open it up to the floor. Now to the introductions. I'm Jess Caraway, and I work in the planning section on disaster recovery grants here at HCDD. Sharonda?
Good afternoon, I'm Sharonda Liddell, and I work with the Housing Department on the Public Facilities team.
I'm Mary Itz. I work in the Housing Department in the Planning and Grants Management Division with Jess.
And is there anyone else from Housing who would like to introduce themselves? Okay, hearing none, y'all at the Mayor's Office, please go ahead and introduce yourselves.
Good afternoon. My name is Ryan Slattery. I'm with the Mayor's Office of Recovery. I work with Housing and Community Development to help advance large federally funded disaster recovery efforts. Thank you.
Laura, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. Good afternoon, all. My name is Laura Patino. I'm with the Mayor's Office of Resilience and Sustainability.
And we just want to say thanks, Laura, for helping to get this all set up. Okay. And now we'd like to jump right in. So HPW, those of you who are helping us with this program, please go ahead and start introducing yourselves.
This is Paramjit Kang. I'm with the Melrose Park project, and my team, Prakash, go ahead and introduce yourself and your team.
Good afternoon. This is Prakash Luitel, Capital Projects Team Lead for Melrose Park.
This is Sudarshan Reddy Gauni for Flintstone project. My team is Yugen, is the project manager on this.
Oh, I think you're muted.
Oh, anybody else from your team?
Okay. Mohammed Sabzawadi, managing engineer. My project manager, he already introduced himself. Ready?
Thank you.
This is for the French Town project.
This is Paresh Lad with the Stormwater or Transportation Drainage Operations Stormwater Planning section.
Hey, was anyone else from HPW that'd like to jump in? I do think we got all the project leads. Oh, Greg,
Sure,
you're muted too.
Hey, there you go, Greg. Good job.
Sorry. Greg Carrington with work for David Wardlow in the financial management services end of disaster cost recovery.
Win-win working for Guni Surasan for Frenchtown. He's the public work.
Okay, great. And if we missed anyone from HPW, or if HPW jumps on late, please feel free to just jump in at the end and let us know who you are and the stuff you're working on. So, okay. Now, for those of you who are joining us today, I'm happy to just sort of let whoever's willing to take the floor go ahead. Or I can start calling on folks, either one, if there's someone ready to jump in.
I'll go. I'm sorry, I came in a little bit late. Just introducing ourselves.
Yeah, so thanks, Jennifer, for propping on. As soon as we hopefully get the next step will be those of us who have joined us from the community, but please go ahead.
Okay, sorry. Jennifer Osland with the Planning and Development Department.
Thank you. Yeah, so I'm happy to just go down the line then. So there's a 713 number that ends in 9205. If you'd like to introduce yourself.
That's actually me. This is Ed Wolf. I'm on my computer and on my phone, so I could talk to you if I needed to.
Great. Yeah,
And I'm with, here on
sorry.
behalf of the Use Association of Realtors.
Yeah, and as you're introducing yourselves, please feel free to provide any background information that you have. You know, we'd love to hear it. So the next one I see is Bruce Nichols.
Hello, I'm just a neighborhood person leading on drainage improvement out in Frostwood and surrounding neighborhoods near Memorial City.
Great, thank you for being here. Abby?
Hi, Abby Robertson. I am the Vice President of Planning at the Texas Medical Center.
Great. Assad?
Hi, I'm Assad. I'm a project engineer from Cyber Engineering.
Great, thanks for being here. David? He might still be muted.
Oh, I apologize. I was muted. David Lowe with BGE Inc., and I'm here representing ACEC and Houston Strong.
Great. And that is there anyone else that I missed that is joining us today, not from the city, who would like to introduce themselves? Like I said, I do know that we're going to get a few stragglers, like I was told.
I'm KJ Asakura with Asakura Robinson.
Thanks, Mr. Asakura. Sorry I missed you.
That's all right. We're planning and landscape architecture firm here locally in Houston.
Great.
And we worked on the resiliency plan for the Houston as well.
Welcome. Thanks for being here. Was there anyone else? Okay, and same for anyone who shows up at the end. We'd love it if you just introduce yourselves to let us know. Let us know who you are and you know, whatever you feel like sharing about the work that you do and why you love Houston. Okay, so I'm gonna charge ahead. And I just want to say, please be mindful of your mics going forward. And then, yeah, feel free to speak up once we get to the end. Here's some of the history and the background for the CDBG MIT grant. After Congress passed the bill funding the mitigation program, HUD published the Federal Register in 2019, laying out the basics and requirements for this grant. HUD allocated mitigation funding to communities that had received HUD CDBG disaster recovery funds for disasters occurring from 2015 through 2017. The City of Houston received a direct allocation of CDBG DR funds for the 2015 flood events. Therefore, HUD allocated a portion of the CDBG MIT funds directly to the City of Houston. In subsequent disasters, like the 2016 flood and Hurricane Harvey, HUD allocated CDBG DR and CDBG MIT funds to the state of Texas and did not directly allocate funds to the City of Houston. The CDBG MIT grant is a brand new grant for HUD. HUD utilized information from the CDBG program and FEMA to create guidance for this grant. The goal behind the grant is to provide additional funding to those places working on disaster recovery in support of efforts to reduce future loss and make communities more resilient in the face of disaster risks. In our administration and implementation of these funds, we consider local and state efforts to make sure we're doing the most with our investment in the community. A key step in getting HUD's approval for this grant, and for the many others that HUD issues, is developing an action plan for their approval. In the development of the action plan, we followed the steps as described in the Federal Register to incorporate the risks identified in the city's hazard mitigation plan. The Office of Emergency Management played a key role in helping HCDD identify the risks in most need of addressing so that we could go to HPW to figure out how to make the most of the funds received. We drafted the action plan, sought public comment on our planned strategy for mitigation, and submitted to HUD. HUD approved our action plan this year in May. When we were working with OEM in the identification of risks to mitigate and developing those strategies with HPW, we had to make sure we were meeting the definition as provided by HUD, which is activities that increase resilience to disasters and reduce or eliminate the long-term risk of loss of life, injury, damage to, and loss of property, and suffering and hardship by lessening the impact of future disasters. The CDBG MIT grant also has a little bit different of a timeline from other disaster recovery grants. This grant will last 12 years, and we need to make sure at least half of the funding is benefiting low and moderate income communities, and that we're expending half of funds by the midpoint of the grant. Another requirement of the grant is why we're all here today. Each recipient of a CDBG MIT grant must ensure they're engaging with their community by reaching out to citizens twice a year. You all will serve to increase transparency in the process, offer feedback, and serve as a forum to foster dialogue during our progress. Your input is important because it helps us gain community perspectives and can help us understand the context for the work we're doing in the community. Y'all might be wondering, well, what's expected of us, or what's the time commitment? The short answer is we look forward to your and any future interested citizens' participation in these hour-long bi-yearly meetings, and for you to not be afraid to ask us questions. To that end, please feel free to drop any questions into the chat, and we'll try to tackle those first once the presentation concludes, and if we're not able to during this meeting, we'll follow up as soon as we can. I'll be putting the department email for questions into the chat, but please also feel free to follow up with me directly. In addition, if you have any suggestions of folks who you think should be a part of these meetings, please also give that a thought. I'll be sending a follow-up email to ask if you have any suggestions for folks to add to the committee as members going forward. On this slide, you'll see the types of activities that we're eligible to pursue in addressing the mitigation needs of the city. Between the nature of disasters typically experienced here in Houston, OEM's assessment of risks, and HPW's input on how to address flooding risk, the city came to the conclusion that the best way to serve our community would be to invest in infrastructure to reduce and prevent flooding risk. Because of the longer timeline and the focus on mitigation without a direct tie back to a specific flood event, the city is allowed to strategically use these funds. The Housing Department is working directly with Houston Public Works to carry out this program. As identified in the action plan mentioned earlier, HPW will prioritize and has identified some projects for CDBG MIT. Priority will be given to projects that primarily benefit low and moderate income communities, can be completed in a timely manner, which coordinate with other local and regional infrastructure efforts, have co-benefits to meet the goals set in the city's resilience strategy, and include natural infrastructure or other low-impact development methods. So quickly on this slide, here's the budget for our CDBG MIT program, and we'll dig into the projects comprising the local flood mitigation program in the next slides. Once we identified infrastructure activities as how best to address the risks of and mitigate future flood events with these funds, we continue to collaboratively partner with other city departments to ensure successful oversight and implementation of the grant. In addition to the collaboration mentioned in working with OEM and HPW, the Mayor's Offices of Recovery and Resilience and Sustainability help us to make sure we're sticking to the goals and progress of the Resilient Houston Plan. The mitigation grant is not the first in which HCDD has partnered with HPW on infrastructure efforts. Currently, we are working on similar projects for CDBG DR15, which, like I mentioned, the mitigation grant is tied to. Now, before I hand it over to Sharonda, I just wanted to show y'all a map of the proposed project locations that we're developing under this grant. We'll come back to this at the end, just so everyone has a little bit of a framework. They are Melrose Park, Frenchtown, Turkey Gully, and Cambridge Rainbowwood. Sharonda?
Thank you, Jessica. So moving to the 4 projects that has been identified on this page, working alongside our city departments, we're working together as a sub-award with the Housing Department as well as HPW. We have been able to identify 4 proposed projects for utilization of MIT funds. Please note that at these times, all projects are still being vetted for eligibility, and some projects will have to be reviewed by our HUD local office before we're able to move forward with these projects. So these are proposed potential projects and or may be subject to change if we're not able to move forward with those projects. So the first project is the Melrose neighborhood project. This is our first project that we are moving forward with use of CDBG MIT funds. Right now, we're in the process of environmental review as well as waiting to receive our HUD authorization for release of funds before we can move forward with this project. Project scope improvements consider conveying stormwater runoff, including ditch regrading and reestablishment to receiving points of the Harris County Flood Control District drainage system, replacement and resized driveway coverage, and asphalt pavement overlay or replacement. The budget for this project is estimated at approximately $19.9 million, which is also may be subject to change. Construction timeline is expected to begin in quarter four of 2024 and last until 2030. Our next proposed project is Frenchtown. The improvements also consist of infrastructure projects conveying stormwater runoff, consisting of ditch regrading, reestablishment to the receiving drainage system, replacement and resized driveway covers, sidewalk, and asphalt pavements. The estimated approximately budget for this project is $8.4 million. Let me also note that these projects will be using leverage funds. So HPW will be utilizing CIP funding for the design phase, and the MIT funds will only be used for construction phase of these projects. So I also want to point that out as well. So estimated construction timeline for this also is expected to begin in quarter four of 2024 and last until 2030. As we receive the project schedules for these projects, we will continue to update the construction timelines as well on these projects. Our next project is Cambridge Park, which is one of the parks that will have to undergo the HUD review for the additional scope of the project, but majority of the project scope is drainage improvements in Ramblewood neighborhood to create 24 acre-feet of retention storage. That project estimated budget is $6.6 million. And the construction timeline for that as well to begin in quarter four of 2024 and last until 2030. Again, this information will be updated as we move through each phase of the project. The last identified project as well is Turkey Gully, which is project scope consists of drainage improvements in Shady Acres neighborhood to create drainage diversion from Turkey Gully to White Oak Bayou. The construction timeline for that project is expected to begin in quarter four of 2024 and last until 2030. And Paresh, not sure of the expected budget, but if you have that and would like to share it at this time, please let us know.
Sure. Right now, our estimated budget is $10 million for that particular project.
Okay, thank you for that. And those are all the updates on those proposed projects. We do have additional projects in the pipeline. You know, we do have some additional outlines of scopes for these projects, but we just want to kind of give you an overview as it relates to the instruction phases of those projects. And HPW team, please feel free to elaborate if you think anything is needed at this time, or we can wait on the additional questions if those questions arise as it relates to the projects to provide more details.
Did anyone from HPW want to jump in to provide any more description? Again, it's okay if not, we can just tackle those if there's any questions.
And this is Paramjeet. I think Sharanda did a pretty good job explaining overall big picture scope and budget. So if there is any question, we can address those.
Okay, great. Yeah, so now I want to just say thanks again to Sharanda for providing such an excellent overview of the projects we have lined up so far. And we can open it up to questions. If you'd prefer to submit by email, our email is hcddplanning@houstontx.gov, which I will throw into the chat in just a second. I will call on any hands that I see raised. Oh, great, there's already some. And yeah, once I put that in, again, please feel free to email either that email or to me directly with any questions if you don't feel comfortable asking them right now. So, okay,
and just,
yeah. Oh, go ahead,
Sharon. Sorry, if I may just jump in, I kind of want to elaborate on the Q4 timeline for the construction, just kind of give a little bit more background on that. As I stated, both departments are leveraging funds, so HPW would be doing the design phase of this. So because the design phase is not being utilized by the MIT funds, that has to happen first. So it's going to take some time for the construction phase to start. So typically design timeline is usually 1 year to 2 years before we can move forward with construction. So I just kind of wanted to give some background on that so it doesn't seem like we have the funds now and it's taking a longer time for us to get to construction. So that is why that timeline sits as Q4 of 2024. And again, these are estimates.
Great. Thank you for that. Okay, I'm going to jump right in. The first hand I see is from Ed. Please go ahead.
Great, thank you. And thank you for the information. I think the two questions I have are the total of these 4 projects represents how much of the total available funds that we'll continue to present projects for.
I know it's a lot of it. Are you able to do that quick math, Sharonda, or is there someone from HPW who might be able to?
No, I have that information. However, I don't have Turkey Gully on my spreadsheet, and Paresh may have, but I can kind of give you an example of what we have right now. So the total with Melrose, Frenchtown, and Cambridge Ridge is about 37 million together. And so we have a total of 57 million for mitigation funds that's available. And that's after we take out some additional project delivery costs. For the original grant awarded was 58 million. We have to take out project delivery. So it left us with 57 million. And so with those 3 projects right now, that's at 37 million. So Paresh, if you give me that number, I think you said it was 10 million for Turkey Gully. If I'm correct, then that would make it about 47 million.
Correct. That was 10 million for Turkey Gully. And then we did have the additional parks that we're working on. So I think this list that we've got so far with the other projects that are pending would probably eat up most of that allocation.
Right, and we do have an additional project in the pipeline that's be a sub-recipient project that's requesting about 9.5. So we haven't got the green light on that yet. So just even considering that right now, the mid balance we have was 10 million. So if we add in Turkey Gully, that's 10 million, then that would eat up all the mitigation funds.
Okay, my only follow-up question, thank you, was I noticed there was land acquisition or real estate acquisition in the charge. Was that required for any of these projects, or are these all on land that was already owned by the city?
Yeah, so at this time, no projects have acquisition. These are all going to be detention infrastructure type projects. Great. And HPW can correct me if I'm mistaken.
Correct. Everything's within city right of way or the land that we own.
Right.
Great.
Thank you, Ed. Mr. Asakura?
Yeah, is this slideshow or the brief project description for those 4 projects available that I could kind of look at it? I'm not familiar with all the locations, so I'd like to kind of get familiarized with that. So.
Yeah, as soon as we conclude this, we'll do what we can to get this up on our website so you can review this again. Once we conclude, once we conclude all the questions, I'll just sort of show you guys how to get to that website, and I will put that website into the chat. I can do that right now.
Great, thanks.
Are there any other questions right now that we can tackle?
If no other questions, real quick, I would like if HPW can kind of just jump in. I know some of the projects that we do have are related to some smaller projects that's being partnerships with, like the Harris County Flood Control for Melrose Park. So if we can just give some background on how that project I know is working with a different partner as well, and how the infrastructure of the project is, going to mitigate and flow down the channels. So just some background on that will also be helpful as well if somebody for the Melrose Park want to jump in.
Sure, Sharonda. This is Prakash for Melrose Park. We are closely working with Harris County Flood Control District. Harris County Flood Control District is improving the channel that is going through the Melrose neighborhood, and also the channel on the west side of our neighborhood. And also they are going to improve the Halls Bayou. In addition to that, Harris County Flood Control is working on mitigating the runoff that is coming from this neighborhood plus other areas. So they are working on building some detention basins for mitigating the runoff. So City of Houston is going to improve the neighborhood for conveying the runoff from the neighborhood upstream to the outfall of the channels that is going right through the middle of this neighborhood. So we are closely working with flood controls on this project. And the project will be, as Sharonda said earlier, the project will be basically improving the roadside ditch on both sides, plus upgrading the driveway, culverts, and overlaying asphalt pavement depending on those street conditions. Thank you.
If anybody else have any other additions or any partnerships on our other projects, please feel free to share that information. If not, I think that would be it on our projects.
Yeah, if no one from HBW wants to jump in, and if there aren't any other questions, I'm happy to walk y'all through our website really quick. So yeah, like I said, here's our website. From the main housing page, which is up here, you can find all of our disaster recovery grants, all the grants that we do with our regular entitlement grants. And then once you're on the disaster recovery page, like I mentioned, you can toggle to any of those. This is the DR15 one, like I mentioned, that the mitigation one is tied to. You can just click back and forth. But for this grant, the mitigation grant, up here we've got the description, which is a lot of what I just mentioned to y'all. The action plan that I mentioned that we had developed to send to HUD is right from this first top box. And this has everything that we needed to sort of lay out for us to execute the grant. And once we have a little bit more information, and once, like Sharonda mentioned, some of these projects need approval. Once that's a little bit more figured out, we will be doing updating of the action plan to reflect a little bit more detail and updated spending timelines. So that's a big document, but if you do want to get into a little bit more of the details for these projects, some information will be there. The contracts, once we've got a little bit more of this figured out, will be in this middle table. Once one of the things that HUD requires is that we have to let them know what our progress is. That comes in the form of a quarterly progress report. And like I mentioned, when we were doing this, we had to make sure that we were receiving comment from the public at the outset. So we did that, and that is here. Once this meeting concludes, and for all future citizen advisory committees, we will be putting the recordings up here in this box. So just so y'all know, you can always come here and reference it. So yeah, that's the walkthrough. Were there any sort of last questions that anyone had that we can try to tackle? If there aren't any, like I said, please feel free to either email me directly, because I do believe you all received an email from me with this invitation. Please, you could also just email the one in the chat, the HCDD planning at houstontx.gov. If you knew folks who might have interest in this and have early questions, please feel free to forward the HCDD planning at houstontx.gov email to them. If they have interest in participating in the meetings that we are going to be holding for this going forward, like I mentioned, bi-yearly, and if you have questions in the interim before our next meeting, please do not hesitate to reach out. But yeah, I will be following up just to sort of say thank you, to check in, and to remind y'all that that if there's anyone that you know who could be interested, I'd be happy to reach out to make sure that we're growing our numbers and getting as much input as we need to successfully, make sure the grant works and that people are hearing about it. So yeah, I want to say thanks again. And if there's no questions or any comments that anyone has, or if anyone else wanted to jump in with anything, I'd like to say thanks. And I think that concludes our meeting. Thanks, everyone.